Hello everybody, welcome to the New Paranormal. I'm your host, Professor Joseph Dent. I believe that we are on the verge of a paradigm shift that will upend everything we currently understand about the universe and our place in it. And I think this unprecedented shift in thinking is going to have powerful impacts on every level of our society. But we can get into the details of that in a little bit. First, I'd like to talk about what it is we're going to try and do here on this channel. People have been reporting certain kinds of experiences in every culture throughout history on every corner of the planet. And those experiences don't fit comfortably into our current scientific models. Not because they're silly, not because they're rare, and not because the people reporting them are unintelligent or confused, but because these experiences lie just outside the boundaries of what modern science was designed to study. This channel is going to be exploring those experiences. We're going to do it carefully, we're going to do it scientifically, and we're going to do it without ridicule. Now, this channel is not about beliefs, and it's not about disbeliefs either. I'm not here to tell you what to think, and I won't try and convince you what you must believe is the truth. I'm simply extending an invitation. It's an invitation to take a new look at some old questions which the scientific community openly admits it doesn't have any credible answers for. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look and see if some of the assumptions that we've been carrying around for hundreds of years might actually be holding us back and limiting what we're able to see. One of the most widely known unsolved problems in science is the question of consciousness. We can study the brain in extraordinary detail. We can map neural activity. We can even observe the correlations between brain states and mental states, and yet there is still no widely accepted explanation for how a physical brain produces a subjective experience. If consciousness were simply a byproduct of computation, an epiphenomenon with no real agency, then it becomes extremely difficult to explain why thinking about doing any particular activity so reliably results in you carrying out that activity and seeing it done. When we assume that consciousness is something private, locally contained, locked inside of our skulls, then certain experiences appear on their face to be impossible. We label them as paranormal activity and we assume that they can't be real. I'm talking about things like telepathy, remote viewing, reincarnation memories, shared intuitions, the sense of being stared at. These things seem like they violate the rules of science, but that's only because the rules of science were written without any attempt to account for the presence of a conscious mind. But if consciousness is fundamental, then we have to account for it. And it has to be present in any explanation of any experience that we put forward. It would also mean that consciousness is not contained inside of our heads, that it's free to roam about and interact with other conscious minds. And if it's behaving in this way, then it's doing so without being limited in its perception by our physical senses. What if the problem isn't that consciousness is so complicated and mysterious? What if the problem is simply that we've been starting from the wrong place when we approach the question? Is it possible that consciousness doesn't emerge from the brain at all? What if consciousness exists prior to matter and simply interfaces through the brain? In that model, the brain wouldn't create consciousness. It would simply interact with it. It would interface through the brain. In the same way that your radio doesn't produce a signal. It receives and tunes and expresses the signal, but that signal isn't created in your radio. I don't believe that consciousness is created in the brain. Now, I'm not making any actual claim here. I'm just putting forward a hypothetical framework. It's a new lens that we can look through. And when we look through this new lens, we see reality a lot more clearly than we did when we were looking through the old lens. When we assume that consciousness is something private and locally contained, locked inside of our skulls, then certain experiences appear on their face to be impossible. We label these experiences as paranormal activity and we dismiss them because they couldn't possibly be true. But if consciousness was fundamental and it wasn't confined to our heads, and it was free to roam about and interact with other conscious minds, then it also would do so without being restricted by the limitations of our physical senses. When we start thinking about consciousness in this way, then those experiences I just mentioned no longer seem supernatural. They just seem like things we don't know much about yet because they haven't been studied very well. Now, I can't speak about this personally. I've never had any of these experiences, but hundreds of thousands of other people have. And yet, the scientific community has a long history of dismissing these experiences as simply impossible, which conveniently allows them to ignore them without bothering to disprove them. Now, this channel isn't going to try and prove that these things are really happening. That's not what we're about. We're simply trying to establish that there might be a more complete model of reality which would actually allow for these experiences to coexist with the knowledge that we already have. So my claim is that any model of reality that doesn't account for these experiences must be incomplete. And I'm not okay with accepting an incomplete model of reality if it means we have to ignore the lived experiences of hundreds of thousands of people and pretend those things aren't happening. So I'm suggesting that we continue to search for a model that will accommodate the knowledge we've already gained, but one which would also allow for the explanation of the experiences people are having that we currently call paranormal. Now, in our we are going to take our time. We're not going to rush through the information. We won't cherry pick data and we won't pretend that bad experiments are good enough. Nor will we dismiss the skeptics and ban them from joining our search. After all, skepticism is essential. It keeps things grounded and honest. It should absolutely be used to challenge extraordinary claims. But we should remember that skepticism cuts both ways, and it should also be used to evaluate old assumptions that are no longer serving us and are actually holding us back from new scientific discoveries. We're also going to look for connections between the various types of phenomena that people are reporting and see if we can't regroup data and maybe find some new insights that were previously overlooked. So if consciousness is real, and I would argue that it might be the only thing which we know for a fact is actually real, and if consciousness has agency, which it obviously does, and if it interacts with the world at all, then we should be able to detect its presence not by trying to measure consciousness with a ruler or weigh consciousness on a scale, but by observing the results of its interactions with other objects in the universe. I mean, you can't see gravity, but you know that it's real because you can see how it affects things in the universe. I'm going to suggest that we take the same approach to our study of consciousness. If we are able to scrape together some useful information, we're not going to use it to try and discredit or disprove anything that other people believe. We're simply going to try and apply that knowledge to broaden our understanding of what humanity is all about, who we are, and where we're headed. I'm glad you're joining us on this adventure. I think it's going to be fun, and I think we have a lot to learn here. So let's get started. Our first stop is, of course, the proverbial rabbit. So let's get started. The first place we're headed is, of course, down the proverbial rabbit hole. I've never had any of these experiences myself, but I tend to believe the people who report having these experiences, and I would like to find an explanation as to what is going on, because I have a sneaky suspicion that the explanation for paranormal phenomenon is going to change everything we currently understand about the universe and our place in it. I suppose that it's no big secret anymore that over the years I've had my differences with the scientific community, specifically their arrogance and their attitude when it comes to their findings and their theories. I don't happen to think they're as competent as they would like us to believe. How much longer do we all have to keep pretending that scientists are the only people on this planet who are capable of knowing anything? I'm sorry. Please forgive my emotional outburst. It's just that I find it incredibly frustrating to have these so-called geniuses ridicule and dismiss anything that they didn't think of. Whether or not they are capable of comprehending any of the theories they deride seems to be of no importance to anyone, least of all the high-minded members of their intellectual cadre. Still, they give away the game by declining every offer to engage in public debate before an audience who could then decide which theory makes most sense when applied to everything we all observe. Their cowardice betrays their own self-doubt. I no longer care who wins this fight, for I can see the only thing that matters now is the path that will be taken by tomorrow's minds. And one of the two is only a dead end, which we are all well acquainted with for more than 50 years now. The so-called scientific community will be forgotten and neglected before they even reach adulthood. I only pray that I'm still alive to see humanity united and cannot comprehend the possibilities that await the potential of our conscious minds. I'm glad that you're joining us on this adventure. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be interesting. And let's get started. Our first stop on this adventure is, of course, the proverbial rabbit hole. Oh man, I'm having deja vu again.